All right. I'm joined by Mike Boudreau, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at CB Supplies today, and we're talking all about PERT and PEX. Mike, thanks so much for joining me today.
It's great to be here, Justin. Thank you very much. I look forward to this discussion with you.
Absolutely. So let's get into a really basic question. What is PEX at a very high level?
What is PEX?
Yeah.
PEX is at a high level. PEX stands for cross-linked polyethylene. It's a common material used for potable water, radiant heating systems, hydronic systems. It's been around for 35 plus years in the world.
Okay. And so, what is then my next question is what is PERT?
Well, PERT, it has the same acronym at the start. It's made from polyethylenes, but it's the process of manufacturing it's different. So it's actually polyethylene raised temperature, and it's just on how it's made is different from PEX.
And same uses as PEX as well, you're saying, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They have the identical applications for potable, hydronics, radiant, exactly the same applications.
Excellent. So PERT's fairly new to the North American market, but it isn't a new product in general. Can you give a little bit of a background of sort of where this product originated and how it kind of took off in other markets before it came here?
Sure. Like most of the products that we see in our industry, they do originate over in Europe. So I would mention that PEX had originated about 35 years ago. PERT actually wasn't too far behind it on the radiant side, about 30 years ago. In the North American market, it's been here about 10 or 11 years altogether. We've been one of the first companies to develop that. We're in year, I'm going to say 8 or 9 right now.
Wow.
So that's where it came from, and it how I like to say it is it's the next generation of PEX. It's the same but different.
Got it. So the differences between the two of them. Let's start with the manufacturing process. What can you take me through like what's different in just the manufacturing process between PERT and PEX?
Sure. So the extrusion process is very similar. For those not familiar, it's a pretty straightforward process. What makes PEX and PERT different is actually PEX. There's three different types of PEX in the market. Predominantly, there's only two used. There's PEX A. That is a product that you can cold expand. That's using a tool to expand it. And then there's PEX B, which there are some you can expand, but typically you use crimp on it. We manufacture PEX B. So PEX A, PEX B, and PEX C, which isn't really used, it uses technology that is irradiating it with energy to give it its molecular structure. It's just too cost prohibitive. It's not used. So the main difference is PEX gets its strength at the molecular level from a secondary process. So very quickly, PEX A, it is called the peroxide method. And how the manufacturers do that is they introduce chemical peroxide into the extrusion process, and molecularly it cross links, and that's where the cross linking comes from, and it gives us its strength and properties for pressure, temperature, and applications.
Oh, okay.
PEX B, yeah, so that's PEX A. You hear that there's ones in the market in North America, Europe, everywhere. PEX B, which we make, is called the saline solution. So how we do that is at the plant in Surrey, we extrude the material off. It's all ready to go, either in coils or straight lengths. It goes into a steam room for 24 to 48 hours, and the release at a higher temperature causes the material to relax, and it actually gets its properties and strengths that way.
Gotcha.
So that's PEX. So that's how we do it right now at the plant. We do both PEX B and PERT. Now the advantages of PERT is it's in the formulation of the material, that all that it needs to do to get its strength, and actually molecularly it's much more, it's stronger, more flexible, and we can talk about that, is
Mhm.
as is it's extruded, there's no secondary process.
Okay.
So as soon as it comes off the line, it's ready to go. And from a manufacturing standpoint, that's a cost savings. You don't have to invest in chemicals. You don't have to invest in steam plants. So it gets you more production, which is obviously a goal for anyone that is producing anything. is the faster you can produce it, just like on a car line. The more you can produce, the more efficient you become.
Oh, 100%. And so you produce both PEX B and PERT at your plant in Surrey, you're saying, right?
We do, yes.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Okay, and then talk about the performance. So you touched a little bit on the strength and the durability. Can you talk a little bit about the temperature, the performance of one versus the other, the longevity of both products?
So each one PEX PERT, they are made to an ASTM standard. There is certain tolerances we all have to be to. So PEX and PERT, the minimum standard, we both make it. But at the higher end, for pressure and temperature, PERT actually has better performance because of it's not cross-linked, but the way that it's built, it can handle more pressure and temperature. It also has a lower coefficient of friction. So for pumping applications, it has less friction, less energy. You don't need as much pump energy to pump fluid through the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say there, and the big difference is our PEX B and our PERT. One of the things that they look at is it's called the chlorine classification for tubing. So that's its resistance to avoid oxidation. As you increase the chlorine content, the most you can have is 100%. So we have the highest classification of, it's called a CL5. And what that means is you can run continuously a recirculated water through the tubing and it won't stress crack.
Oh, wow.
So the advantage of that is longevity of the tubing. It
Mm-hmm.
will last, as long as it's within the design parameters, it doesn't exceed temperature and everything, it will last. Whereas some PEX manufacturers, specifically, it's more common with PEX A, they have a lower cell classification. It's called CL3. So that means that there could be stress cracking in the long term if you put it in a recirculation system. You have to be conscious of that. So it's just a little bit more durable. It can handle environments. For example, if you're close to a water treatment plant and they're injecting chlorine into the system, if
Mm-hmm.
you're close to that, you're going to have higher chlorine concentrations.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of PERT and PEX, and sort of which applications would call for one versus the other.
Okay, for sure. So wherever you use, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I'm going to try to be neutral on this, is wherever you use PEX, you can use PERT, but where you see the biggest advantage is on the radiant side, because we've made the decision for PEX. We have in our PEX line, and every other manufacturer pretty well does, is they have a certain resin that you can use for potable water, and we've carried that through into the radiant side. So you can technically use radiant tubing for potable, but it's more expensive, and I don't know why you would, but some guys will use it. For example, P-trap primers. They'll have leftover tubing, they'll use it.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, we've made the conscious decision of not adding it for radiant. It's not rated for potable. It is specifically for radiant or non-potable applications. And the reason for that is by not adding that additive that makes it potable, it is much more flexible. So when you're laying radiant heating systems, snow melt, in floor, you have a tighter bend radius. And because of the properties, it doesn't have a memory like PEX does. So PEX, if you extrude a coil and you pull the tubing apart, it'll bounce back and try to go back into its original shape.
Right.
Whereas PERT, because it is structured differently, it won't. So what you'll find is if you're laying down tubes, for example, when you come to the corner on PEX ones, they'll tend to bounce up.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put a tie down. Well, with PERT, you really don't have to a lot of times, and it just makes it easier.
Yeah.
So the contractors find that a little bit easier to deal with, especially if you're doing that. And for new construction in low rise or high rise, if you're going through studs and stuff, it's easier to bend the potable water as well.
That makes perfect sense. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the installation process. So is there sort of like different tools or techniques that PERT requires that would be different from PEX?
Well, that's the beauty is PERT doesn't need any special tools. It can use existing tools you have for PEX. So specifically crimp, you have different choices for crimp tools. Every wholesaler, I mean, you carry a ton of them. For the cold expansion in areas that's popular, you continue using the existing ones that are out there. The most prominent one is Milwaukee, but there's also DeWalt, and there's a few other guys. So you can continue using that. The tubing itself is made to the same tolerance as PEX. So the only exception we have is because of the physical properties of PERT versus PEX A specifically, it does react a little bit differently. So if you've installed it with PEX A, PERT is a little bit different. So we have all the collateral for installation instructions, we have videos, and all of our sales team are able to train the contractor on that. It's a minor change, very similar. The only difference is, and even the PEX A guys don't recommend it, is they can be heavy-handed pushing the tool into the tubing.
Hmm.
We recommend just letting the tool do the work. And I've literally done it just holding it with one finger, and it doesn't take any longer. It's very similar. It's just a little bit of an educational process.
Interesting. And how about the compatibility portion? Like, can PERT go with existing PEX fittings and PEX tubing?
Exact. Yeah, it can. So it's all to what's called the SDR rating. So it's a standard dimensional ratio. So all the tubing, whether it's PEX or PERT, has to be to the same size to be compatible with the fittings, which are to an ASTM standard. So you can use our fittings, you can use other people's fittings. They will all work as long. What we say is, as long as they are to the standard,
Hmm.
we are fine with that, and we warranty the system.
Perfect. So you already touched on the training and the education piece. You've been doing a lot of that over the past couple of years for sure. What are sort of those key things that you're talking about in the training? And also, more importantly, are you seeing some sort of common misconceptions amongst the contractors that you've been training that you've had to educate on, I should say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like anything new in the market when it's first introduced, we're all, by human nature, we resist change. We're a very
Mhm.
traditional market, but we're seeing that the evolution of new products into the market are getting faster and faster. But
Mhm.
yes, we do get this. The common feedback we get is it's not to the same standard, and no, it's not, because it is specifically for PERT. We've gone through all the approvals, everything, but the standards are different because it's specifically for PERT. So if you try to compare it to PEX, it's not going to reference. So there's equals to it. The other thing we get is uh, the other common one we get. The other common one we get is, can you use other people's fittings with it? Yes, that's common. And then there's a question on the code expansion, on how you do that. The other misconception, and I say it's mudslinging, is there is a misconception out there that competitors in the PEX industry will publish either verbally or on social media. They will say that the performance of PERT is inferior to PEX. It's
Mhm.
actually the reverse. It has better performance. It's a superior product, and we can say that because we make both, and that's why we've
Yeah.
gone in this direction.
So what legs are those competitors standing on then with those claims?
Well, if you don't, I always take the approach: if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. So we just go about our business and convert
Yeah.
Yeah.
our customers over, and that's what we've done across Canada. Wherever we've introduced it, PERT has usually won out.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So
So big changes came, I guess, this month to BC in terms of regulations. Can you talk a little bit about the changes that happened?
absolutely. And actually, it comes into effect this. So not dating the video, but the BC building and plumbing code come into effect this Friday, March the 8th. So
excellent.
Excellent.
what they did, yeah. So what they did is they've adopted the National Plumbing Code of 2020,
Mhm.
and that within that code, it is referenced as a approved product is PERT. We've had it approved in Canada well before this was brought out, because a lot of the other jurisdictions saw it as equal to or better. There is a provision in the codes that you can accept it, and so we've had PERT approved. The first place was in Ontario, and that was 7 years ago. We had to go through a process, but it got approved, and then it sort of had a domino effect. So in BC, it's going to be effective. There's no exceptions that PERT can be used for potable and radiant. We've been working on that for years. It's a little bit frustrating because this is where we make the product in Surrey, BC. It was the only place we couldn't sell it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that's a headache from your standpoint for sure.
Absolutely.
So, is there any concerns then that you're seeing with with code compliance from transitioning from PEX to PERT, as you're going to see a lot of contractors doing this now in BC?
Yeah, and I think from our experience, it's introducing it to them and
Yeah.
showing them the benefits and just getting it out there. I think once they get their hands on it, it happens relatively quickly. The last province we did was in Quebec a few years ago, and it happened relatively quick. All of our wholesale distribution channels, we had them converted within 6 months.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And from a price standpoint, not getting into the details, but the nice thing about it for the consumer
Hmm.
is you are getting a premium product and at a PEX B price. So we know in the market that PEX A usually has a premium because it does cost more to process and extrude, whereas the PERT, we price it at the PEX B level, so for crimp. So you're getting all the
Mm.
premium benefits at a more relative cost.
And how is CB Supplies kind of set up? I mean, you already mentioned your facility in Surrey, but how are you guys set up to really support that new change in the code and that demand that you're going to see from that BC market?
Well, luckily, we have a good group of individuals that have been planning for this. I mean, we're fortunate that we serve the Canadian and the US market. So through COVID over the last 3 years, which was impressive, is we actually expanded our plant and added four new PERT extruders
Hmm.
through COVID when everything was restricted, and uh, the extruders came from Italy and they came in on time, which was surprising through COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've invested heavily in our plant for the additional volume, not just in BC, but across Canada and the US. We're just in the process of completing a major capital project at the plant that includes improving the power supply because we've actually exceeded the capacity because of the number of extruders we have. And we're doing some optimization too. So just more efficiency, better, tighter quality control of the product. So that's in the process right now. We anticipate that'll be complete by the end of this year.
Exciting.
So yeah, it's exciting, and we're building the capacity in anticipation of the demand. For us, it's actually converting the PEX. It's sort of neutral for us because we've been supplying the BC market since 1999. So we're going to be shifting our PEX to our PERT. It'll be a win for us, across Canada, but it's we have that volume already accounted for.
Amazing. And I mean, every contractor likes the support after the fact, right? So, can you talk to me a little bit about CB Supplies' PERT product, Vipert, and sort of your warranty and your support after the fact once everything's installed?
Absolutely. So we have a 25-year warranty, manufacturer's warranty, which means against manufacturer's defect, any of those kind of issues, and that goes across the system. So we're very fortunate where we have our manufacturing plant, we have a QC department. So we stand behind our product. We try to get ahead of any of these issues. If anyone that's listening knows, that's one of the things we try to get ahead of it. We'd like to get involved with the contractor, the wholesaler, the owner right away if there's an issue, to get on site and get samples so we can send it back and have a full engineering review of what failed. And if it is an issue that the tubing has failed for some reason, we will come good for that. Absolutely. From my experience, I've worked for four manufacturers, and typically, I would say the majority of it is installation related.
Mm.
Um, but if it is, I've seen fittings that came out. We make some of our fittings, we import some. Sometimes there's a defective fitting, there's a ring that's defective, there's a cut in the pipe, but we try to get ahead of that and we stand behind it. We've got our team, We've got our own sales team across Canada that are there to address those issues, along with support from the plant and management as well.
That's excellent. Right on. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you taking the time today, Mike.
No problem. Anytime. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, Justin.
And for everyone listening, if you're interested in any CB Supplies training on PERT or PEX, take a look on our website for any sort of training events that we have coming up with CB Supplies. And if you have any questions, as always, reach out to your local branch or your local sales rep. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.
Take care.